English translation 563rd contact. Saturday, the 1st of June, 2013, 11:28 hours.
Hello, Ptaah. You are back early today, but greetings and welcome. With your permission, I have some questions that I would like to ask you.
What I thought after what Florina told me. But I greet you. Of course, I know that you got up only a few minutes ago, but if we are to discuss the incident, there is no need to hurry. Besides, I should leave today, after the correction work with Bernadette, because there are some tasks I have to do. For this reason, I also asked at the beginning of the week if we could do the correction work during the week, but you told Florina that this was not possible because she had to work.
Exactly. That is true, because at her place of work a member of staff was absent and Bernadette had to take over her work, if I understood her correctly. But to get straight to the point, my question is about child supervision. Why do I want to ask how you Ptaah and handle this, or just how you see it? Here on Earth we have not only families with children, but also nurseries, playgroups, kindergartens, scout groups, general schools and youth organizations, etc., in which the children and adolescents are supervised by designated supervisors who are also responsible for the children and their safety and actions.
The reason why you are asking for this is already known to me, as Florina has already reported to me.
There are certain things I do not want to talk about officially, nor do I want to talk about other things that arise that need to be addressed. Consequently, I think that when I call up the report of the conversation and write it down, I simply leave out certain parts of the conversation. But at least what we are about to discuss regarding the matter in hand, it would be good if I could write down your answer or our conversation on the subject while we talk on the computer. This will take a little longer, but it would be good if I had everything in writing right away, for the General Assembly tonight.
Of course, you can decide at your own discretion what you want to be considered official and what not. And you can also take notes of the conversation, so I will speak more slowly so that you can write everything down at a reasonable speed. What is not related to the matter at hand, you will not want to write it down right away. You will want to recall it later, I suppose.
Yes, that is so. Good. That's all I wanted to know. Then you can answer my question now, and please also mention up to which age you will place children and adolescents under supervision before they can supervise themselves in a certain way, and should also take responsibility for it.
That is what I want to do. If I may speak as a father, and if I should also mention our general approach to the care and supervision of children and adolescents, there is indeed a lot to be said. With regard to the last part of your question, it is to be said that legitimate self-supervision and responsibility of the adolescents happens, as the case may be, at the earliest from the age of 14, but at the latest from the age of 17. In our approach to this, we take into account development and mental maturity, understanding of responsibility, etc. If these factors to be assessed with regard to the performance of self-supervision and the assumption of personal responsibility are found to be satisfactory to a large extent, then, however, note Billy, in the case of the Ptaah, many courses of instruction will still have to be completed up to about the age of 70 with regard to behavior, morality, all aspects of coping with life, learning and observing the laws and recommendations given by nature and creation, the formation of knowledge and, with regard to training, of various types of activity. And it is only when all these courses have been completed that we will declare the human being to be sufficiently educated for life, which you express with your concept of majority. However, as far as the question of the supervision of children and adolescents is concerned, this is not an easy task, as it must be carried out with the utmost seriousness and responsibility. And this refers both to the supervision of children and adolescents in the family and also in groups, schools and organizations, etc. Truly responsible supervision means that the supervisor must always be present, in such a way that children and adolescents are under direct supervision as necessary. Of course, This direct supervision cannot always, and not in every case, be the case. Because children and adolescents have their own views just like adults, so they also have their own behavior patterns, which also aim to avoid supervision. But this is acceptable to the extent that the supervisor can be reached immediately when necessary. But as he or she must always be careful to have everything under control, and also to know where the children and youths to be supervised are, what they are doing, and what they are doing. In the case of older children or adolescents, a strict presence of the supervisor can thus be relaxed within a certain responsible framework. But the younger the children are, the more permanent supervision is necessary. The opposite is irresponsible. It should be remembered that children and adolescents, as a rule up to the age of 14 or 17, can be as well educated as they are and also display a certain attitude of responsibility. But it is not guaranteed that they will suddenly become addicted to any kind of minor or serious degeneration due to internal or external influences. Thus, despite good upbringing and good manners, they can cause unexpected, careless, or conscious damage or unintentional physical harm to themselves. And this is possible because children and adolescents are not yet mentally developed and stable enough not to fall prey to harmful impulses. This is why children and adolescents, unfortunately here and there also adults who are not yet really independent and aware of their general responsibility, are unpredictable in their behavior. Often, animation by other children and adolescents or even by adults plays a decisive role in this, causing them to fall into imprudence, exuberance, wantonness, and harmful actions, and to cause evils which also cause great harm to themselves or others, or even serious physical injury. So it is essential that children and adolescents are under the best possible supervision by a responsible person who is able to keep an overview of everything and also exercises the necessary control. The absence of such a supervisor is negligent and irresponsible the younger the children and adolescents are. This is basically what I have to say in response to your question.
Should also be clear enough. But the question, which persons are supposed to perform such supervisory tasks, or what is your personality like?
This varies, but the rule is that mothers carry out this task because they are the ones directly involved, and they are closest to their children and adolescents and are most familiar with them. Of course, they can also be fathers, which is fine. But the father relationship is not the same because it is more practical, material, objective, etc., as opposed to the mother relationship, which is more human, mental, moral, loving, and caring. In this way, it is also held with us, and it is also the case that supervision of children and adolescents is done by persons from schools, etc., as it is with you on earth. Parents, however, mothers and fathers, as well as supervisors, who in the above-mentioned manner do not fulfill their duty of care and supervision of their own children and adolescents or those entrusted to them for care and supervision, are irresponsible. Before couples are allowed to marry or before persons are allowed to carry out such supervisory duties, we conduct training courses and aptitude tests in this respect, which absolutely guarantees that children and adolescents are brought up correctly and also provides them with the necessary security. It must be said, however, that it is also the case in our country that there is no complete supervision and control with regard to the supervision of children and adolescents, so that it is also unavoidable that children and adolescents cause damage or accidents. Children and adolescents always remain a risk factor with regard to comprehensive compliance with safety and order, etc., because at this age they are still largely unpredictable, despite good education and instruction, etc. So, despite good supervision of children and adolescents, damage and accidents cannot be avoided. But greater damage and accidents can be avoided by a supervisor who is present at all times or can be reached in the shortest possible time and who is aware of his responsibility.
My view is that mothers should be available at all times, or at least within minutes, to supervise children and adolescents. Children and adolescents should always be kept in view, by which I mean that this should be the case when there is a supervision task that is not available in one's own home or premises. In this respect, I think that supervision and control should be subject to stricter rules than is the case in one's own home or premises.
You see this in a correct way because at home and in your own garden or grounds, supervision can be carried out more loosely than it is in other places. At home or in your own garden or grounds, the parents or supervisors employed by them are responsible for any damage or accidents. In other places, however, the owners of the buildings, gardens, grounds, and woods are also held responsible, so that stricter supervision is needed to ensure better safety for children and adolescents. So there is a big difference whether supervision takes place in one's own home or premises, in other buildings not belonging to one's own home, or in other premises. It is also necessary that there are also rules for keeping order in the home and in other places in relation to the buildings and the grounds. For example, that certain areas or premises in buildings may not be entered both by children and adolescents, and also by certain adults.
Well said, and I think you are tapping into what Florina has told you. But it is precisely from this that the accusation is made that there is hostility towards children.
These are just stupid and inconsiderate speeches of people who, on the one hand, do not understand a decisive order as well as the mental processes and the behavior of children and adolescents, and therefore cannot understand them either. Even children at a very young age must learn an order and stick to it, and this must apply all the more to older children and adolescents. Strict order must be observed by them, and this also includes forbidding them to enter or stay in certain premises. But all this has nothing to do with hostility towards children, but with a well-conceived order. But if this is not understood by adults, then this is very regrettable and makes it clear that, on the one hand, due to any kind of influence or circumstances, wrong thinking, wrong action, and the correctness of an order cannot be understood. Or that, on the other hand, the psychological necessity with regard to the way of thinking and feeling towards children and adolescents is missing, as is the psychological ability to educate them.
That should be enough explanation, thanks. Then a question regarding decisions once taken, whether they should be revoked if a single person suddenly opposes them after a while, although he or she was also in favor of the decision.
I have also been informed by Florina on this point, so I will say the following. Sensible decisions should not be revoked and should not be replaced by new and inadequate decisions. And what you speak without words is equivalent to a reasonable decision concerning a valuable order, which should not be revoked by unreason and incomprehension and by inaccuracy, and should not be adversely affected. Logic alone teaches us in this respect that the existing decision is correct and should not be changed, because only in this way can the established order be preserved.
Then the question in relation to Selina. Why should she be allowed to be in the visitor's room with her carers when other children are not allowed to be in the visitor's room under the overall group decision?
In contrast to children who are not resident in the center and who are not from their home or parental home, as you call it, this is very much the case for Selina. So the child must also be granted different rights to those of children who did not grow up in the center and are not resident there. Selina is also confronted with the visitor's room several times a day as she passes by, so it is only natural for her to be able to enter and stay in it. And since the child has multiple disabilities, it is not able to enter the room on its own, but only with the help of a person looking after it, so it can be well protected in the room, and there is no danger of it causing any damage. Children and adolescents who are not resident in the center can be refused access to or stay in the visitor's room, but this cannot apply to Selina, who has her home or parental home in the center. I also know your and your family's accommodation options, and I can say that the visitor's room is the ideal place for you and your family to spend time together with your child. The rooms in your flat are small, so a table of the size and design that is in the visitor's room will not fit. This room is ideal for Selena and her severely handicapped child to carry out appropriate activities in. So it is justified that she, as a child with multiple disabilities, is allowed by an exception to use the visitor's room with a suitable supervisor.
Thanks, that was probably necessary to say. But then I also have a question which relates to something completely different, and which has nothing to do with child supervision. It relates to a matter of the following nature, but which, so as not to touch on something that could be misunderstood, I want to have discussed only between you and me, and which also does not relate to the overall group decisions that have been made, such as the things we have just discussed. It is something quite different that I simply want to clarify. So I would like to hear your opinion in a private way on the following. What do you judge this to be? I think I understand the whole thing as also in the sense that, and what would you say in relation to?
Your view is correct. It is a form of coercion, and the other refers to a form of power. The other is a thing that is in accordance with reason. That is, whether or not it is given in a correct way. Therefore, at such a moment, such a possibility that you are referring to must be considered.
Well, then I am not wrong with my view, which I will not mention openly, because otherwise there could be some misunderstanding, which unfortunately many human beings on Earth always tend to do. Then we can now turn to other things, because there are still a few things to come, about Ramon, the Poland and Czech Republic group, as well as about Australia, Tasmania and New Zealand, and about Kazakhstan and Michael Horn.
Florina has explained to me what I need to know about these matters. And so we have reached the following decision. 1. The old rules still apply to Ramon with regard to the finished manuscript, so that he can keep everything as he sees fit and in consultation with you. So, he is supposed to process the finished manuscripts in his own responsibility and according to his own sense of responsibility in such a way that they can be printed and distributed according to his system as small type in Spanish. New arrangements and contracts can no longer be considered, as such with private individuals can no longer be permitted, because everything would run out of the established order. 2. Australia, Tasmania, and New Zealand, we have found, should be considered as one country for the Australian National Group in relation to the distribution of books, writings, and the spreading of the mission and teaching of the truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of the life. 3. All study groups shall be officially allowed to create their own websites, but shall be fully responsible for their structure and content. This should now be allowed because we have recognized through a look at the future that this will become absolutely necessary and inevitable in the foreseeable future. If this is not taken into account and not acted upon, then in the future more and more people all over the world will take up in a private way all accessible material that has been and will continue to be published by you, in order to spread it distortingly on the internet in their own websites. For this purpose, it is also necessary for you to place links to such study groups on your website, as is initially planned for the groups in Poland and the Czech Republic. The whole thing has become a matter of urgency, which is why you should also act quickly. 4. The group in Kazakhstan, which calls itself the study group of Bililogy, is to be granted the status and also all the rights of a national group. Since in this group now various things have been translated into Russian, you and Christian should make an effort for the necessary contracts for their printing and distribution, which should be valid for the whole Russian language area. These are the things we have discussed and found, and which are now of necessity.
We will make every effort.
There will probably be other things in the future that will lead to enlargements.
That is to be expected. But now, once again, I have a question that has come to me. which I cannot answer exactly myself, although the matter itself is of interest to me. But I would like to say the following first. The mountain Carmel, or Carmel, which has lush vegetation and is called Jabal al-Carmel, as I remember from my time in Arabia, was the place where Elijah once looked great. In Hebrew, Carmel is said to mean orchard or vineyard of God. This is in itself a harmless term, considering what happened there in ancient times. Mount Carmel is actually a mountain ridge about 23 kilometers long, about 10 kilometers wide and about 550 meters high, which runs along the Mediterranean coast, overlooking the plain of Jezreel. At least that is how I remember what I learned about it in Jerusalem. In the Bible now, in the 1 Kings, verse 18, the events that once took place there are described, which is known in Christianity as the judgment of God on Mount Carmel. The prophet Elijah summoned 450 prophets of Baal and 400 prophets of the Asherah deity to this mountain in order to prove that his teaching of the truth, teaching of the Spirit, teaching of the life alone was of correctness, but not all the nonsense of the false teachings that were misled by the idolatrous priests. So he also spoke of the power of creation, and of the knowledge of the natural laws and recommendations of creation, and that miracles could be done by knowing them. And to prove this truth, he called the priests of the two deities Baal and Asherah together, and then demonstrated the truth of his teaching before King Ahab. Logically, as a shrewd prophet, he succeeded in his demonstration, and consequently the imaginary foreign gods did not help their priests, and did not let fire fall from the sky, while the pile of wood from Elijah, however, quickly began to smoke, and then burn brightly. Thus the two gods Baal and Asherah proved to be completely powerless. And when Elijah exclaimed that creation alone, reality and its truth were great, and the only truth, the people threw themselves on their faces to the ground and exclaimed, "The Lord is God, the Lord is God." Of course, this has been thoroughly falsified in the Bible. For example, in 1 Kings 18:39 it is said that Elijah then, so it is lied, had the Baal priests seized, after which he is said to have killed them with his own hands. This is of course nonsense, which we have already made clear at the 248th official contact conversation, as follows.
248th Official Contact Conversation, Volume 7, page 248, Billy, Ptaah, sentences 101 to 104.
It is hardly debatable. Again and again I am approached with questions about the Bible and its contents. One such question is, for example, what is the story about the fact that the prophet Elijah slaughtered 450 prophets of the idol Baal on Mount Carmel by a judgment of God, as described in the 1 Kings chapter 18 verse 40 of the Bible with the words, "But Elijah said to them, Seize the prophets of Baal, that no one may escape from them. And they seized them. And Elijah led them down to the river Kison and slaughtered them there." My explanation of this is usually doubted, namely that the Bible lies and distorts the facts of the time. As I know the facts, the entire books of the prophets and other contents of the Bible have been falsified beyond recognition, and the prophets themselves and their deeds and activities have also been completely misrepresented, often giving the impression, which has survived in Christianity up to the present day, that these prophets killed and murdered, but this does not correspond with a single syllable of the truth. Elijah never slaughtered the 450 Baal prophets either. But this massacre was carried out by fanatical Jewish priests and their followers, as was the slaughter of another 400 Asherah prophets, but there is no mention of their murder in the Bible. Of the total of 850 prophets slaughtered, who were actually priests and not prophets of their cults, only the 450 Baal priests are mentioned in the Bible.
This is correct, because the 400 other murdered are kept secret, just as the truth was also distorted in the way who the real murderers of the priests were. This falsification, however, was conceived with full calculation and recorded in writing to prove the power of God, as well as the divine calling of the prophet Elijah, who was considered by his work as one of their people in faith. In fact, however, he was only one of her people, but not of her faith, which was never understood by the Jewish people. Elijah brought the truthful teaching of creation and its laws and recommendations, which was thoroughly misunderstood by the Jewish people as a whole. As it was also the case with all other prophets and their teachings, right up to the prophet Emmanuel, whom Christianity, emerging from heresy and misunderstanding, then cannibalized as the Son of God.
But what I am addressing this issue is this. In the Bible, 1 Kings, verse 38, there is a lie. Then the fire of the Lord fell down and devoured burnt offerings, wood, stones, and earth, and licked up the water in the pit. I would now like to know how Elijah was able to kindle this fire. All I know is that he had Ptaah help and that he also studied alchemy. So he probably reached into the alchemistic bag of tricks and started a self-igniting fire, which is also known as automatic fire, I think.
That is indeed also the case. Elijah had been taught chemistry by our contacts at the time, and he knew how to make chemicals. So he used the following chemicals: ammonium nitrate, zinc powder, ammonium chloride, and strontium nitrate, to make a balanced mixture which he sprinkled over the wood and then poured water over it, creating a reaction that started the fire.
Safety advice from Billy. This highly flammable and oxidizing mixture is highly irritant and is also very harmful to health.
Another question is the one that I am supposed to work out and answer for Michael Horn's questionnaire. Christian Frainer has translated the whole thing from English as follows. I read Wilbert B. Smith's brochure entitled The New Science, and you said that he was a contactee. Can you tell me if he was a contact person with the Ptaah? Because in his writings he talks about someone called Alan, and according to your information, Alan is a liar. There is a pamphlet, which remained unfinished because of his passing away in 1962, in which he talks about the 12 webs of reality. Can the truth be found in it? Note Christian Frainer. This question refers to the list of genuine contactees provided by Simya Se, See Pleiadian Pleiaren Contact Reports, Volume 6, page 264, sentences 238, 248. Can you give a clear answer to this question, which I can use to answer the question?
That is not a problem, but it is necessary to go into detail and explain the whole thing as follows. A certain Wilbert B. Smith was probably a contactee, but unfortunately one of the negative kind. His contact was only a one-time and absolutely meaningless contact, and furthermore only a hypnotic direct contact with the group of the Ashtar Sharon, whereby the whole thing was, as already mentioned, effectively of an insignificant nature. As hypnotic direct contacts, we call those where the hypnosis is not performed independently by apparatuses, but directly by the human being, but where the hypnotic transmission of energy thanks to hypnosis over long distances is also performed by strong transmitting apparatuses. So Smith, like many other contact persons, was in contact under hypnosis with post-hypnotic aspect. And he did not act consciously and not of his own free will, as it was common practice in the Ashtar Sharon group to keep the contact persons absolutely under control. And this was the case with all the numerous contacts who were abused by the Ashtar Sharon group. Such contacts with Earth humans were very often the case through the Ashtar Sharon group, whereby this group simply impulsively influenced Earth humans to make them willing tools for their dark machinations on Earth. These influencers were in great numbers, but none of the human beings ever had any idea what the actual reality of the contacts was and how they took place. In fact, they never had any real physical contact, but always only hypnotic impulsive contact, with real visions also being part of the whole. So that many of those contacts, who were abusively manipulated by the Ashtar Sharon group, were convinced that they had real contact with extraterrestrials. So they were not aware that they had no real encounters with the aliens in this sense. And consequently, they had also not flown in their flying apparatus, because in fact they were only pretended to have had real hypnotic visions. Through this hypnotic real vision illusion, the contactees were misled in such a way that they actually believed that they had real contacts with extraterrestrials and had flown with their flying apparatus. So they were no longer able to distinguish reality from the hypnotic illusion and lived or still live in the implanted delusion that their contacts were real. A further fact was that these contactees were hypnotically and suggestively given false data about the origin of the Ptaah group. Thus, practically all these contactees were reminded of different places of origin. But all these facts were unknown to us at the time when we gave you the list of these contactees, because at that time we only analyzed the memories of the people concerned. These were, however, so profoundly hypnotically and suggestively manipulated that we were deceived by them and therefore did not recognize the memory manipulation. We only found out the real facts 3 weeks ago, with better technical possibilities which we now have at our disposal and which we have now used for the first time. In recent years, we have noticed things that seem strange to us in various such contactees, which is why we use the new equipment and devices to reanalyze the memory impulses of all still living contact persons and were able to penetrate their hypnotic blockade. In this way, we have now come across actual reality and truth. These evaluations lasted until yesterday, so today I can also tell you the results of our efforts and analyses. It must be said, however, that the persons forced into contact in this way are left with no conscious knowledge of their own, but only the post-hypnotic memory, which shortly after the manipulation became so strong that it could not be reversed. And this applies without exception to all those many Earth humans whom we have named individually or in lists as contact persons and who, without exception, have been forcibly manipulated in a hypnotic suggestive revisionary way by the Ptaah group. In all cases, however, the impulses were such that the recipients of the impulses had false visions and thought that they had experienced contact, which is why they took notes, wrote books, and also made public statements. The reason for this was, on the one hand, that this was supposed to lead to a worldwide disinformation regarding the existence and origin of various extraterrestrials, while on the other hand it was also connected to a plan of the Ptaah group, which consisted of becoming a ruling power on Earth and finding a new home there. The plan was that this group would act as a kind of savior for the Earth's population against various evil alien invaders who were supposed to threaten Earth. For this purpose, a big spectacle with aerial battles and fights in Earth orbit was planned to make everything seem real. And this would finally have led to the Ptaah group taking over the rule of Earth as an extraterrestrial armada, so to speak. So all this was aimed at with the hypnotic contacts to Earth humans, and it was all to come about after official contacts with the Earth governments had been established. This could actually have been achieved by influencing certain Earth humans through impulses, which would also have included the rulers of all countries, who would have acted according to the impulses in such a way that the plans could have been realized. Since these persons, of whom there were a greater number, all failed and for reasons as yet unknown to us did not fulfill the orders placed in them, the evil plan did not come to pass. All the contactees, whom we also used to call by their names, were supposed to be the pathfinders for the realization of the plans of the Ptaah group. And since all these Earth humans were hypnotically and suggestively manipulated by the aliens of the Ptaah group, which we did not know at that time, we called them real contact persons. That was probably wrong of us, because we let ourselves be misled, which led to false assumptions on your part and also on the part of Earth humans, which resulted in the assumption that these contact persons with the Ptaah group had real physical or telepathic contact with any aliens. Of course, this was not true, as we know today, but even then it seemed strange to us, because we did not know any other group apart from the three groups unknown to us. So we assumed that these contact persons were connected to the three unknown people we did not know. So this misunderstanding was due to us, which we regret very much. And it should also be mentioned that this form of forced manipulative contacts had nothing to do with our impulse contacts, which we used to have with Earth humans, but for them unconsciously and in such a way that they assumed that their progressive ideas were their own. In particular, these impulse contacts from our side to scientists took place in order to promote the sciences of medicine and technology among Earth humans, which has also been proven by the very rapid developments in the last decades through many inventions and innovations, etc., as is actually the case. Our contacts were also such that the recipients of our impulse transmissions had no knowledge of the whole of the unconscious telepathic information impulses. The Ashtar-Sharon group, which finally ended in the Dal universe, as you know, was supposed to cause disaster on Earth, which would have happened if their manipulative machinations with the forcibly contacted Earth humans had been successful. As for the name Alan, which was used by Wilbert B. Smith, it was also a fantastic invention, as were all his utterances. With regard to the name Alan, it did not mean that he was a liar, but that the meaning of the name meant the liar. This is described in PP Volume 6, page 264, sentences. Ptaah 238-248, the following. With regard to the name Alan, or what this word is supposed to be, we found out that it is just a falsely invented word formation which has no value or meaning. This word form is also not to be found in any of our languages or in any language we know, of which we know and have stored more than 3.7 million in our entire field of knowledge and expertise. You told me about this word formation, Alan, during my last visit, so that I could make sure in the meantime that it does not exist in any language known to us. According to this, a group of specialists tried to get to the bottom of things in Japan, and it turned out that the word formation, Alan, is a pure, unwise and lying invention of deceitful and maliciously lying Earth humans, whose evolutionary level is in the lower reaches of the earthly lowest level. As a name, this word formation, Alan, which is intended to deceive and cheat, does not appear in the entire area of the universe known to us, but this does not mean that we do not know names of a similar form. Thus, for example, the names Alan, Aland, Alan, Alan, Aljon, Alan and Nala exist in various languages known to us, whereby this last name represents the reverse form of the mad word formation, Alan. But the meanings for these names are all very negative forms, which is why they are only used there with the human beings who live in degeneration and exist with peoples, whose education and observance in matters of truth and truthful evolution is still at a level of primitive form. So the names also mean primitive, just as Alan means the truth adverse. Alan means the truth twister. Alan has the meaning the truth verifier, and Alan stands for the unworthiness, the truth hater. The name Aljon has the meaning the destroyer, while Alan means the deceiver. Null, the name which in the reverse form would result in Alan, has the meaning the liar.
These are new findings again, which show many things in a new light.
That is so, but we are also not immune from mistakes and misguidance, not even in the mentioned relationship by the Ashtar-Sharon group, which has been doing very bad things and has caused a lot of trouble regarding alleged physical and telepathic contacts with various extraterrestrials from allegedly different places of origin. As we have now been able to find out, their victims were hypnotically and visionarily duped into alleged physical contacts, as well as into alleged messages of Christian religious form. This, along with various other underhand machinations, which caused wrong assumptions and views in many Earth humans, even among civil servants and military personnel, etc., also For the sake of confusion, sightings with various kinds of flying apparatus were actually organized around the world, as well as strange acts of animal mutilation, etc., as well as by Earth humans who were impulsively hypnotized by the Ashtar Sharon group. We only found out about this through Ask It, because she told us that during the fighting in the Dal universe, 4 prisoners were taken from the Ashtar Sharon group before their armada was completely destroyed. One of the 4 prisoners was the first representative of Ashtar Sharon and armada commander. Recently he, like the 3 other prisoners, finally agreed to break the silence and reveal the many evil machinations of the group so that we could get to the bottom of it with their hypnosis contactees and find the truth. These prisoners also gave the names of various such false contactees who had already died, including one Wilbert B. Smith, as well as others in various countries in Europe, Africa, Japan, America, Israel, and South America, such as Brazil and Argentina, etc., but also Australia and Russia, etc.
These investigations now effectively have a hand and foot?
That is so, yes. But our investigations in this regard were very laborious, because a lot of work had to be done on these contacts, which covered more than 7 past decades, and many other things also had to be clarified. This required a major worldwide mission on our part, which lasted more than 7 months and was completed in the first part 3 weeks ago and the rest 2 days ago.
You never told me anything about that.
That's right. But if I had talked about it before we got our results and were sure of them, you would have asked me many questions that I wanted to avoid. Furthermore, we had to be careful, because we still do not know the forces that could damage your typing in your computer. It was to be feared that this would have triggered something over which we had no control.
I can understand that. But now the question arises whether the whole thing with the prisoners and your investigations have perhaps also led to findings with regard to the 3 groups unknown to you. And if so, which ones?
This was also clarified with the prisoners, and their statements make it absolutely clear that the Ashtar Sharon group had no connection whatsoever with the 3 groups unknown to us.
And what about earthly Secret Service flying machines? Are they still circulating around the world?
This is indeed the case, and according to all that we can observe, there is a lot of activity in this area.
Quetzal once told me privately about prisoners, especially Americans, but also others who were taken to Czechoslovakia and then to the Soviet Union, where they were violently abused for medical and drug experiments. They had also been used in atomic bomb tests, etc. They had also been taken by brute force, together with animals, into the immediate danger zones of the explosions, chained up. So far, more than 10,000 human beings, in particular American prisoners of war, are said to have been killed in such a bestial way without any action or also intervention by the U.S. government.
That is correct. The U.S. government and the senior U.S. military personnel were aware of these events, which were such that captured U.S. soldiers and also other prisoners were taken by air to Czechoslovakia, and from there to the Soviet Union, where they were cruelly tortured and effectively murdered in medical, drug and nuclear weapons experiments. The U.S. soldiers and also others had been arrested as prisoners of war in Vietnam and Korea and deported to Czechoslovakia and the Soviet Union, where they died as a result of inhuman experiments. If they were only mortally wounded and exposed to radiation or lapsed into madness, they were executed. In Vietnam and Korea, for example, a very large number of U.S. soldiers disappeared, as did other persons whose whereabouts were never publicly clarified. The U.S. government and the U.S. military intelligence community also remained silent, which is still the case today. And of course, this also applied to the dictatorship of the Soviet Union, as it does to present-day Russia. There is no doubt that the Soviet Union had corresponding files and that Russia also still has them today, as does the USA, of course. But whether these files will ever be made public is questionable. In any case, the fact is that the U.S. Secret Services knew about these monstrous criminal activities, but did not do anything about them, nor did the government. So they did not let anything come to light, but remained silent in their dealings with the American people.
I do not think there is anything more to be said about that, and I also cannot find words to say about it, except that it is probably very dangerous to spread this knowledge.
Which you are certainly right about, because as far as we know, the files on this subject in the USA and Russia are still under the strictest secrecy. And that we are talking about it openly now can be dangerous.
That may indeed be the case, but the point has now been made that we should also not hide it, even if it could be dangerous. The human beings should know what really happened.
Your words express your conviction that an open word alone is the correct thing to do, and that the truth should not be hidden. And from this point of view, I would like to say a few things that concerns you and where you should not interrupt me, and, according to my words, you should also not say anything about it. So this is what I want to mention. You have seen many countries of the earth, as well as some scenes of evil revolts and wars, but also places of historical events. And this was already the case when you were a boy traveling with my father. It was also the same as a young man and an adult, when you had the opportunity with Asket to see and experience many things that shaped and strengthened you for your life. And also when my daughters Simyase and Ptaah, as well as Quetzal and I, appeared and you traveled with us through the universe and were also able to go with Asket into the Tao universe. Everything brought you insights and experiences that no other Earth humans had ever had before. And you have experienced much evil and evil on Earth, and through your strength and your courage, your endurance and patience and your assertiveness, you have achieved the almost impossible. And also with great courage and with astonishing and almost inexhaustible energy, you have turned to your preaching prophetic mission and made it flourish. Your rise from a simple boy to a proclaimer, coming from a large family of 6 brothers and sisters, and whose father was a cobbler and a simple man, and whose mother was a simple housewife, is more than astonishing when all the circumstances of your life and environment are considered. Everything in the whole process of becoming the herald of today was exceptionally hard and difficult. You have only managed all this because you are the human being with enormous energy and strength, and you have overcome even very hard blows of the fate of life brought to you without despair or failure. Only in this way have you finally made it to the point to found and build up the Simyase Silver Star Center and to spread the mission from this place, which is already of great value and benefit to many human beings all over the world.
Your speech makes me wonder.
You are not supposed to comment on them. That is why I asked you.
All right, I will refrain from commenting on it in relation to my person. But I am allowed to say something that puts an important thing right?
Have I said something wrong?
No, but you have forgotten something important, if I may mention it.
Of course.
Then I ask you not to speak to me, just as I was also silent in your presentation.
So be it.
Fine, thanks. In what you said, you forgot the most important thing, which is that besides my parents and siblings, I also had your father Svath, Asket, your daughter Simyase, Quetzal, and you and many other human beings by my side, through whom I could learn a lot. After my years of learning and traveling, it was our group members who did a lot of hard and heavy work in building up the center and the mission and spreading the mission practically all over the world. If it had not been for my parents and brothers and sisters, all of you Ptaah and all of the group members who had been working with great strength and inexhaustible dedication, then nothing at all would have been achieved and nothing would have come about. So the whole thing is a matter of common ground for all those involved, and in relation to all that has been achieved at the center. It is only the common work and unwavering commitment of all, and the overall cohesion that has led to success despite many often difficult adversities. Therefore, If it had not been for all the efforts of all the members of the group, the value of which cannot be estimated, Figu and the spreading of the mission would not have progressed as far as it has today. My personality was no more and no less than a member of the group like all the others, and I was perhaps still a bellwether, if that must be taken into account. But basically all the group members are there, and they must be named, because without them, everything would have been impossible.
That is correct, but it does not change the facts of your life and commitment.
I thought you had to have the last word after all. So be it, but that's really all that should be said about it.
I have made my opinion known in a sufficient way, and with that we should end our conversation for today. If you have no more questions, then I will go back on my way.
At the moment I can think of nothing else. Then farewell, dear friend. It is always a great pleasure for me to think about the fact that I have the honor to call you my friend. Goodbye, and see you again soon.
This is also a joy and an honor for me. Goodbye, dear friend. Perhaps it will be soon.